Please take me as your worker. I can do anything." The giant woman dropped to her knees in the settling dust, her voice breaking like dry timber. The storm had torn through Blackwater Ranch like the devil's own breath. Cattle scattered across the valley floor. The barn roof hung twisted, groaning against splintered beams. Ranch hands fled for the house while John Marston fought to save 3 horses trapped beneath fallen timber. Then she appeared. 7 feet of woman emerging from the dust devil's heart. Her hands caught the collapsing beam before it could crush the animals, held it steady while Marston pulled the horses free. The wood should have broken her back. Instead, she lifted it like kindling. Now she knelt before him, her clothes hung in tatters. Her eyes darted toward the ridge where riders sat watching through the haze. Marston studied her face. No madness there, only desperation worn smooth by time. "Name?" "Lara," she kept her head bowed. "Lara Croft." The riders on the ridge turned their horses and disappeared. Abigail emerged from the house, their daughter Sadie clutching her skirts. The woman Dutch Van der Linde stepped from the bunkhouse, his expression dark as Winter Creek water. "John," Abigail's voice carried warning, "we don't know nothing about her. She saved our horses." Marston looked down at the kneeling woman. "Get up, nobody kneels on my land." Lara rose slowly. Her head nearly touched the barn's remaining crossbeam. Dutch spat into the dirt. "Storm brings all kinds of trouble, some you keep, some you turn away." "I work hard," Lara said. "I eat little, I ask for nothing but shelter." Arthur Morgan emerged from behind the barn, leading the rescued horses, his eyes fixed on Lara's hands. The palms bore strange scars, geometric patterns like she'd worked with tools he'd never seen. "Dutch is right," Abigail said. "These are dangerous times. People talk." Marston felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. The ranch barely turned profit. They needed hands for the coming season, but harboring the wrong person could bring worse than financial ruin. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of distant rain. "You got people looking for you?" Marston asked. Lara's jaw tightened. "Maybe. That ain't an answer. It's the only one I can give." Sadie stepped forward despite her mother's restraining hand. She stared up at Lara with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "You're really tall," Sadie said. For the first time, Lara's face softened. "Yes, little one, I am." Dutch shook his head. "This is foolishness, John. We got enough problems without inviting more." Arthur led the horses past them toward the corral. "She did save the animals," he said quietly. Marston watched Lara's face as she looked at his daughter. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. 1 week, he decided. Trial period, you prove your worth, we'll talk permanent arrangements. Relief flooded Lara's features. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This ranch eats weak men for breakfast." "I ain't weak." That night, Marston couldn't sleep. He stood at his bedroom window, watching the bunkhouse. A light burned there long past midnight. The sound of hammering echoed across the yard. By morning, the barn stood whole again. Marston walked the structure in disbelief. The repairs were perfect, better than the original construction. The joints fitted with precision that spoke of master craftsmanship. Arthur found him there, running his hands over the new beams. "She worked all night," Arthur said. "Used tools I ain't never seen. Moved timber that should have required 3 men. Where is she now?" "Down by the creek, studying the water flow." They found Lara kneeling by the stream, her fingers trailing in the current. She'd drawn diagrams in the mud, channels and angles that made no sense to Marston's eye. "What you doing?" he asked. "Checking the water table." She stood, wiping her hands clean. "This stream runs deeper than it appears. Good for irrigation if channeled proper." "You know about irrigation?" Something shuddered behind her eyes. "I know about many things." Arthur stepped closer to examine the mud drawings. "These your designs?" "They could be." Lara swept her foot across the diagrams, erasing them. "If you wanted them to be." The next 3 days passed like fever dreams. Lara worked with impossible stamina. She moved boulders that blocked the north pasture, repaired fencing that had stood broken for months. Each task completed with efficiency that bordered on supernatural. The other ranch hands watched her with growing unease. She never stopped for water, never showed fatigue. When they gathered for meals, she ate sparingly and said little. "Ain't natural," muttered one of the younger men. Dutch's opposition grew more vocal. "She's bringing attention we don't need. People in town are asking questions." "What kind of questions?" Marston asked. "The kind that come with badges and warrants." That evening, Sheriff Morrison rode out from town. His face bore the grim expression of a man carrying bad news. "John, we need to talk." "Private-like?" They walked away from the house toward the rebuilt barn. "Federal agents came through today," Morrison said, "looking for someone, a woman matching your new hand's description." Marston's stomach tightened. "What they want her for?" "They're saying she's dangerous, stole government property, maybe connected to some scientist who turned up dead back east." "They give you paper on her?" "Not yet, but they're asking folks to keep eyes open, offering reward money." Marston looked back toward the house where lamplight flickered in the windows. Abigail was putting Sadie to bed, normal family rhythms that suddenly felt fragile. "She done nothing but help us," he said. "Maybe so. But if she's who they're hunting, helping her could cost you everything." After the sheriff left, Marston found Lara working in the equipment shed. She was sharpening tools with movements too precise for the dim light. "We need to talk," he said. Her hands stilled. "I know. Government men are asking about you in town. I figured they'd find me eventually." "You want to tell me what you're running from?" Lara set down the whetstone. In the lantern light, her face looked carved from stone. "The less you know, the safer your family stays." "That ain't your choice to make." She turned to face him fully. "It's the only choice I got left." The weeks that followed brought miracles wrapped in sweat and soil. Lara moved through the ranch like water finding its level. Natural, inevitable, wrong. She lifted boulders that required teams of oxen. Her hands never blistered. Her back never bent. When the other men collapsed from heat, she worked on. 20 hours without rest. Then 21. Arthur watched her from the corral fence. His weathered hands gripped the rail until his knuckles went white. "Ain't natural," he muttered to Marston. "No person moves like that." Lara knelt by the south pasture, pressing her ear to the ground. She rose and pointed to a spot 50 yards away. "Water there, 20 feet down." Marston squinted at the barren earth. "You sure about that?" "Dig and see." They dug. Water bubbled up at 19 feet, sweet and clear, the kind of find that could change a ranch's fortunes. Dutch spat tobacco juice into the new well. "Devil's luck. That's all this is." But the miracles kept coming. Lara showed them irrigation channels that fed water uphill, crop rotation patterns that doubled yield. She read weather in cloud formations and wind direction. Rain came when she said it would. Drought ended when she predicted. The ranch prospered. Cattle fattened. Fences stood straight. Buildings held firm against wind that had toppled them for years. Prosperity brought attention. Neighboring ranchers rode by with excuses, checking fence lines, looking for strayed cattle. Their eyes tracked Lara's movements across the property. Micah Bell visited most often. His ranch bordered theirs to the west. Success had never touched his land the way it kissed Marston's now. "Mighty strange how things turned around for you, John," Micah said one afternoon. He sat his horse like a king surveying subjects. "Almost like you got divine intervention." "Hard work pays off," Marston replied. "Hard work." Micah's gaze found Lara hauling fence posts. "That woman of yours sure works hard." "Where'd you find her again?" "She found us." "Convenient timing, right when you needed help most." Lara set down the posts, her attention fixed on Micah with predator stillness. He wheeled his horse and rode away without another word. That evening Arthur approached Marston by the water trough. His face carried the weight of unwelcome news. "Been asking around town," Arthur said, "about her. Find anything?" "More than I wanted to." Arthur's voice dropped. "She's been asking questions about soil composition, mineral deposits, rock formations." Marston felt something cold settle in his chest. "What kind of questions?" "The kind prospectors ask before they stake claims." Inside the house, Lara sat with Sadie at the kitchen table. Books spread between them. The child's finger traced letters while Lara guided her pronunciation. Patient, gentle, nothing like the woman who moved boulders and predicted weather. Sound it out, Lara said softly. Cat, sat. Hat, Sadie beamed with accomplishment. Good, now try this one. Abigail watched from the doorway. Her expression had softened over the weeks. Fear gradually replaced by something approaching trust. She's got a gift with teaching, Abigail told Marston later. Uses methods I ain't never seen. Sadie's learning faster than she ever did in town school. What kind of methods? Pictures and numbers together. Says it helps the mind remember better. Another impossibility. Ranch hands didn't know advanced teaching techniques. Neither did former slaves who'd likely never seen the inside of a schoolhouse. The questions multiplied like weeds after rain. Lara worked alone most nights. Her lantern burned in the equipment shed until dawn. The sounds that emerged defied explanation. Metal on metal, wood under pressure, tools that rang with unfamiliar pitch. Arthur crept close one midnight, curiosity overcoming caution. Through a gap in the shed wall, he glimpsed Lara working with instruments he'd never seen. Precise, delicate, nothing like ranch equipment. She turned suddenly, meeting his gaze through the gap. Her eyes reflected lantern light like an animal's. Something you need, Arthur. He backed away without answering. The next morning brought visitors. 3 men in dark suits riding government horses. They dismounted at the front porch with ceremonial precision. Marshal Thompson, the leader introduced himself. We're looking for information about a fugitive. Marston stepped onto the porch. His hand rested near his sidearm. What kind of fugitive? Dangerous woman, tall, strong build. Maybe using an assumed name. Thompson's eyes swept the ranch buildings. Rewards substantial for information leading to her capture. What'd she do? Stole valuable government property. Connected to a scientist's death back east. Professor named Brown. Lara emerged from the barn carrying feed buckets. The marshal's attention locked on her like iron drawn to lodestone. That her? Thompson asked quietly. That's my ranch hand, Marston replied. Been with us a month now. Mind if we talk to her? Mind if I see your warrants first? Thompson's smile held no warmth. Just friendly questions, Mr. Marston, for now. They approached Lara slowly. She set down the buckets and waited. Her posture spoke of coiled springs and loaded weapons. Ma'am, Thompson tipped his hat. Mind telling us your name? Lara Croft. Where you from originally? Back east. Whereabouts back east? Various places. Thompson's partner circled behind her. Standard intimidation tactics. Lara didn't turn to track his movement. You ever know a Professor Emmett Brown? Thompson asked. Something flickered across Lara's face. Quick as lightning, gone just as fast. No, you sure about that? He was working on agricultural techniques, scientific approaches to farming, right up your alley seems like. I wouldn't know. Thompson studied her for a long moment. Funny thing about Professor Brown. He disappeared from his laboratory 3 months ago. Same night someone stole his research notes. His body turned up in a river a week later. Lara's hands clenched into fists. The movement was slight. Arthur caught it. So did Thompson. Terrible shame, Lara said, losing a man of learning. Indeed, Thompson remounted his horse. We'll be staying in town for a few days, conducting interviews, making sure we get all the facts straight. After they left, silence settled over the ranch like dust after a cattle drive. Heavy, inescapable. Dutch gathered the ranch hands behind the bunkhouse. His voice carried across the yard despite obvious attempts at discretion. Government money spends same as any other, he told them. And that rewards enough to set a man up proper. 2 of the younger hands nodded agreement. Fear had taken root in their eyes. That evening, the family ate dinner in strained quiet. Sadie chattered about her reading lessons, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. Lara pushed food around her plate without eating. Her gaze kept drifting toward the windows, watching, waiting. Maybe you should go, Abigail said suddenly, before this gets worse. Lara's fork stilled. If that's what you want. It ain't about what we want, Marston said. It's about what's right. Right for who? The question hung in the air like smoke. No easy answers, no clean choices. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The barometer Lara had fashioned from ranch materials predicted rain within hours. Another impossible skill for someone with no formal education. After dinner, Marston found her standing in the barn doorway. She watched lightning fork across the distant sky. "Storm's coming," she said. "Weather ain't what's got me worried. Should be," she turned to face him. "Weather you can predict, people you can't. Then help me understand. Give me something to work with here." Lara was quiet for a long time. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and possibility. "Some knowledge is too dangerous to share," she said finally. "Some secrets are worth keeping even if it costs everything." The next morning brought Micah Bell and 6 of his ranch hands. They rode onto the property like a small army, armed, determined, righteous in their certainty. "Time for a town meeting, John," Micah called from his saddle. "Folks got concerns need addressing." "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that threaten decent people trying to live decent lives." Lara stepped out of the house. Sadie's reading primer clutched in her hands. The child followed close behind, sensing trouble in the adult's postures. Micah's men shifted in their saddles. Hands drifted toward weapons. Fear made them dangerous. "This about the woman?" Marston asked. "This is about protecting our community from outside threats." Micah's gaze fixed on Lara. "Some threats come with badges, others come begging for work. She ain't threatened nobody." "Hasn't she?" Micah gestured toward the thriving ranch. "Unnatural prosperity, government attention, federal marshals asking questions. That don't sound like threats to you." Arthur emerged from the bunkhouse. Dutch followed along with 3 other hands. The yard filled with armed men choosing sides. "We're having ourselves a meeting," Micah announced. "Democratic process. Let the people decide what's best for everyone. And if we don't agree to your meeting," Micah's smile was cold as January wind, "then we have it without you." Lara stepped forward, placing herself between Micah's men and Sadie. The child pressed against her legs, seeking protection. "I'll come to your meeting," Lara said. Her voice carried across the yard like a bell toll. "Let me gather my things." "Now hold on," Marston started. "No," Lara's gaze met his. "Some fights are worth having. Some are just vanity dressed up as principle." She handed the primer to Sadie. "Keep practicing your letters. Reading opens doors that nothing else can." The child nodded solemnly, sensing the weight of goodbye in the gesture. As the group prepared to leave for town, storm clouds gathered overhead. The wind picked up, carrying the promise of rain and change. Lara walked beside Marston's horse, her long strides easily matching the animal's pace. Her face showed no fear, only the quiet resignation of someone who'd faced judgment before. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "remember that some people are worth protecting, even when it costs everything." Lightning split the sky. Thunder rolled across the valley. The storm had found them at last. The town hall creaked under the weight of judgment. Every seat filled with faces carved from suspicion and fear. Lamplight flickered across worn floorboards where dust motes danced their ancient patterns. Micah Bell stood at the front, playing prosecutor to an audience hungry for certainty. His voice carried the authority of righteousness wrapped around greed. "We got ourselves a problem, folks. Federal agents sniffing around, questions being asked, peace being disturbed." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Heads nodded in agreement. Fear bred faster than rabbits in drought years. Lara sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap. She'd chosen the seat closest to judgment, refused the safety of shadows. Marston stood against the back wall, his arms crossed. Arthur flanked him, jaw set hard as winter ground. Dutch had positioned himself near the door, watching, waiting. "Now I ain't saying this woman done anything wrong," Micah continued. "But strange things been happening since she arrived. Unnatural prosperity, government attention makes a man wonder." Mrs. Patterson raised her hand. "My husband says the Marston place is producing twice what it should. That ain't natural." "Natural or not," Arthur called out, "it's honest work. Is it? Micah's gaze swept the room. Woman shows up in a dust storm. No past to speak of. Performs miracles with her bare hands. Then federal marshals come asking about stolen government property and dead scientists. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Whispers spread like wildfire through dry grass. Marshal Thompson entered from the side door. His presence commanded attention without words. He nodded to Micah, then fixed his stare on Lara. "Miss Croft," Thompson said, "appreciate you coming tonight. Makes things easier when folks cooperate." Lara remained motionless, a stone in the stream of chaos flowing around her. "Got some new information I'd like to share," Thompson continued. "Professor Emmett Brown, the scientist I mentioned yesterday, turns out he wasn't working alone." He pulled a photograph from his coat, passed it to the nearest townsperson. The image made its way through the crowd, gathering gasps and pointed stares. When it reached Marston, his heart sank into his boots. The photograph showed a younger Lara standing beside an elderly white man in a laboratory. Both wore the clothes of scholars. Both smiled with the joy of shared discovery. "That picture was taken 6 months ago," Thompson announced. "Professor Brown's laboratory in Philadelphia. His assistant's name was listed as Lara Croft." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room turned to Lara. She sat perfectly still, her face a mask of carved stone. "Care to explain that, Miss Croft?" Thompson asked. Lara stood slowly. Her height commanded the room's attention. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of mountains. "I worked for Professor Brown. That part is true." Gasps echoed through the hall. Micah's smile widened with predatory satisfaction. "And what kind of work did you do for the professor?" Thompson pressed. "Agricultural research. Techniques to help former slaves establish successful farms. Research that belonged to the United States government. Research that belonged to the people it was meant to help." Thompson circled her slowly. "Professor Brown was found dead in the Delaware River. His laboratory burned to the ground. All his research stolen. You disappeared the same night." Lara's composure cracked for the first time. Pain flickered across her features. "Emmett Brown was murdered for trying to help people. His killers wanted to bury his work, ensure it never reached those who needed it most." "That's a serious accusation," Thompson said. "Got any proof?" "I have his research, his notes, his techniques, everything they tried to destroy." The room erupted in voices. Some demanded answers. Others called for her immediate arrest. Marston pushed through the crowd toward the front. "Let her speak," he shouted above the noise. "She's already said enough," Micah replied. "Federal fugitive, theft, murder. What more do we need to hear?" "The truth," Marston said. Lara looked at him with something approaching gratitude. Then she began to speak. "Professor Brown discovered methods that could revolutionize farming. Irrigation techniques that work with natural water flow instead of against it. Soil treatments that restore fertility without expensive chemicals. Crop rotation patterns that double yields." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "He wanted to share this knowledge freely, especially with freed slaves trying to make lives for themselves. But certain powerful interests saw profit in controlling the information." "Who?" Arthur called from the back. "Government officials, agricultural companies, people who saw opportunity in keeping others dependent." Thompson stepped forward. "These are wild accusations. Where's your proof?" "I am the proof. Everything I've done on the Marston Ranch comes from Emmett's research. The water wells, the irrigation channels, the crop yields, all of it." She turned to address the full room. "Your land could prosper too. Every ranch, every farm. The knowledge exists to transform this entire valley." "Pretty words," Micah said, "but you're still a thief and a murderer." "I never killed anyone. But I watch good men die for trying to help people." "Convenient story," Thompson replied. "No witnesses to back it up." "I'm witness enough." The voice came from the doorway. Every head turned to see Dutch van der Linde stepping into the lamplight. His face bore an expression none of them had seen before. Cold, official, dangerous. Name's Dutch van der Linde. Federal Marshal, assigned to investigate Professor Brown's murder. The room fell silent as a tomb. Dutch reached into his coat and produced a badge. Silver caught the lamplight and threw it back in accusations. Been working undercover for 3 months, following leads, gathering evidence, and what I found might surprise some of you. He pointed at Thompson. That man ain't no federal marshal. He's a hired gun working for the same people who killed Professor Brown. Chaos erupted. Shouting voices, scraping chairs, the sound of men reaching for weapons. Thompson's hand moved toward his gun, but Dutch was faster. The real marshal's weapon cleared leather in a smooth motion that spoke of years perfecting the draw. "Easy now," Dutch said quietly. "Let's keep this civilized." Micah backed toward the wall, his face pale as morning frost. "This is madness. Government conspiracies, wild accusations." "Not so wild," Dutch replied. "Got documentation back at my hotel. Names, dates, financial records. Professor Brown discovered something that threatened powerful interests. When he refused to sell his research, they had him eliminated." He gestured toward Lara. "She escaped with the proof, been running ever since." Marston stepped forward. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Couldn't risk blowing my cover. Had to gather enough evidence to make charges stick." Thompson's fake badge hit the floor with a metallic ring. His true nature stood exposed in the harsh lamplight. "You got no idea what you're interfering with," he snarled at Dutch. "This goes higher than some local marshal can handle." "Maybe so, but I got jurisdiction here, and evidence enough to hold you for questioning." The crowd began to shift. Fear was transforming into something else. Curiosity. Possibility. The promise of prosperity that didn't depend on other people's failure. Mrs. Patterson stood up. "This research you mentioned, could it really help our farms?" Lara nodded. "Professor Brown's techniques could transform every piece of land in this valley. And you know these techniques, every one of them, committed to memory, written in notes they can never destroy." Micah pushed toward the door. "This is all fantasy. Government conspiracies and miracle farming. None of it changes the fact that she's a fugitive." "She's under federal protection now," Dutch announced. "Anyone interfering with that protection answers to me." Thunder rolled overhead. The storm had finally arrived. Rain began drumming against the hall's roof with increasing intensity. Thompson made his move during the distraction. His hand flashed toward a hidden weapon. Shouts erupted from the crowd, but Arthur was closer. His fist connected with Thompson's jaw in a solid blow that echoed through the hall. The fake marshal crumpled to the floor, his weapon skittering across worn boards. "Guess that settles that," Arthur said, shaking his knuckles. Dutch moved to secure the unconscious man. "Need volunteers to help transport a prisoner to the territorial capital." Several townspeople stepped forward. The tide had turned. Fear was giving way to hope. Outside, lightning illuminated the valley in stark detail. The storm was washing the dust from the air, clearing the way for new growth. Lara stood in the doorway, watching water cascade from the roof. For the first time since arriving at Blackwater Ranch, her shoulders relaxed. Marston joined her in the doorway. "So what happens now?" "Now we rebuild, share the knowledge, help people prosper without depending on anyone's permission." "And the government, the people Thompson was working for, they'll keep trying, but knowledge shared is harder to destroy than knowledge hidden." Rain continued to fall, soaking the thirsty ground. In the distance, lightning revealed the Marston Ranch, standing solid against the storm. The land was ready for new growth. The people were ready for truth. The real work could finally begin. Victory tasted like ash in the morning light. Thompson sat locked in the town jail, but his arrest had stirred hornets that wouldn't rest until they found their target. Lara worked the north fence line as if nothing had changed. Her hands moved with the same steady rhythm that had marked her weeks at the ranch, but her eyes never stopped scanning the horizon. "They'll send others," Dutch told Marston as they watched her from the porch. "Thompson was just the first wave. How many others?" "Enough." The word hung between them heavy as storm clouds. Dutch had traded his ranch hand clothes for the dark suit of federal authority. The transformation made him a stranger on land where he'd lived and worked. Arthur approached from the barn, his face grim as winter mud. Got riders coming, 3 from the east, 2 more from the south. They materialized from heat, shimmer, and dust, government men with government horses and government patience. They established a perimeter around the ranch without approaching directly, watching, waiting, applying pressure steady as a screw being turned. Agent Smith dismounted at the property line and walked forward alone. His steps measured the distance between civilization and chaos. When he reached speaking distance, he stopped and removed his hat. "Mr. Marston, Agent Smith, Department of Agriculture, we need to discuss your employee." "She's under federal protection," Dutch called from the porch. "Marshal van der Linde, your authority extends to criminal matters. This concerns national agricultural policy." The words sounded reasonable, official, wrapped in the kind of bureaucratic language that made wrong sound right. "What kind of policy?" Marston asked. "Professor Brown's research contains techniques that could destabilize regional farming economies. Information that dangerous requires careful oversight." Lara approached from the fence line, her tools slung across one shoulder. She moved through the tension without acknowledging it, water finding its level. "Miss Croft," Smith nodded respectfully, "we're prepared to offer you a position with the department, full federal salary, protected status, comfortable laboratory facility back east. In exchange for your knowledge, Professor Brown's techniques, applied under proper government supervision." The offer hung in the air between them, reasonable terms that felt like quicksand. Lara set down her tools with deliberate care, "And the farmers who need these techniques will receive them through appropriate channels when conditions are suitable." "When conditions are profitable, you mean?" Smith's smile never wavered. "The government has broader considerations than individual profit, Miss Croft." Dutch stepped off the porch, his hand resting near his weapon. She already gave her answer in town. Research belongs to the people it was meant to help. Marshal, you're interfering with legitimate federal business. "Am I? Show me your warrant." Smith's composure cracked slightly. "Some situations transcend normal legal procedures. Not in my jurisdiction, they don't." The standoff stretched taut as fence wire. Government authority meeting local law. Federal power testing regional resolve. Micah Bell chose that moment to arrive with his own contingent. 6 riders flanked him, all armed with the confidence of men who believed right was on their side. "Figured you might need support, Agent Smith," Micah called cheerfully. "Communities got to stick together during difficult times." Arthur spat into the dust. "Since when do you speak for the community, Micah?" "Since federal agents started asking reasonable questions about unreasonable situations." He gestured toward the thriving ranch around them. "Look at this place. Prosperity that defies natural law, water where there shouldn't be water, crops that shouldn't grow. Makes a man wonder what kind of bargain was struck to achieve such results." "Hard work," Marston said flatly. "Was it? Or something else entirely?" Micah's gaze found Lara standing beside her abandoned tools. "Miss Croft, Agent Smith's made you a generous offer, federal position, good salary, respectable work. Seems foolish to refuse such opportunity for the sake of staying on a cattle ranch." "Some opportunities cost more than they pay," she replied. "Everything costs something. Question is whether you pay it or someone else does." The threat wasn't subtle. It didn't need to be. Smith stepped forward. "Miss Croft, I should mention that your continued presence here places the Marston family in a difficult position. Federal oversight tends to be thorough. Tax assessments, land surveys, permit inspections, the kind of scrutiny that can be uncomfortable for law-abiding citizens." Abigail emerged from the house with Sadie close behind. The child clutched her reading primer against her chest. Her eyes were wide with the understanding that important things were happening beyond her comprehension. "Mama, is Miss Lara leaving?" Sadie asked. The question cut through official language and veiled threats, reduced everything to its essential truth. Lara knelt beside the child, bringing their faces level. "What would you do if staying somewhere you loved might hurt the people you care about?" Sadie considered this with the seriousness children brought to adult problems. I'd find another way. What if there wasn't another way? There's always another way, you taught me that. Lara's composure finally cracked. She pulled the child close, holding her with desperate tenderness. You keep practicing your reading, she whispered. Knowledge is the only thing they can never take away. Marston felt the moment slipping away from him, felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down like summer heat. How much time, he asked Smith, for what? For her to decide. She's decided, haven't you, Miss Croft? Lara stood slowly, her hand lingering on Sadie's shoulder. If I go with you, the family stays safe. Safer than if you stay. And if I refuse, Smith's smile returned. Why would you refuse such a generous offer? The question hung unanswered because they all knew what refusal meant. Government attention that never ended. Bureaucratic harassment that strangled hope by degrees. The kind of pressure that broke families without leaving fingerprints. Dutch cleared his throat. Got something you all should know. Been in communication with my superiors in Denver. Seems there's been some irregular federal activity in this region. Unauthorized agents, fraudulent documentation. He pulled papers from his coat. Got word this morning. Agent Smith's credentials have been revoked pending investigation. Far as federal law is concerned, he's got no more authority than any other citizen. Smith's face went pale as bleached bone. That's impossible. Telegraph office has the verification if you want to check. Micah shifted in his saddle. Don't matter who's got what papers. Community's made its decision. Have we? Arthur stepped forward. Because I don't remember voting on nothing. Several townspeople had gathered at the property line during the confrontation. Mrs. Patterson stood among them, her husband at her side. Others from the town meeting the night before. We voted last night, Mrs. Patterson called out. Voted to hear what Miss Lara had to teach us. Micah wheeled his horse toward the crowd. You people don't understand what you're asking for. Government attention. Federal oversight. Is that worth some farming techniques that probably don't work anyway? Worked pretty well here, Patterson replied, gesturing toward the Marston Ranch. Water flowing where it never flowed before. Crops growing in soil that was near played out. Smith pulled his own horse closer to Lara. Miss Croft, regardless of paperwork disputes, you still possess stolen government property. Property that will be recovered one way or another. By who? Dutch asked. You got no authority here. Authority comes in many forms, Marshal. The words carried an edge that made Arthur's hand drift toward his weapon. Threats were surfacing now that diplomacy had failed. Lara looked around at the faces surrounding her. The Marston family that had taken her in. Arthur who'd become her staunch defender. Dutch who'd risked his career to protect her. The townspeople who'd chosen hope over fear. 24 hours, she said quietly. For what? Smith asked. To show everyone what Professor Brown's techniques can really accomplish. After that, I'll come with you willingly. Smith considered this. 24 hours. Then you surrender yourself and all materials in your possession. Agreed. He remounted his horse and signaled to his men. We'll be watching, Miss Croft. Don't mistake our patience for weakness. As the government riders withdrew to positions around the valley, Micah lingered. His face showed the frustration of a man who'd expected easy victory and found stubborn resistance instead. You're making a mistake, John, he told Marston. This won't end well for any of you. After he left, an uncomfortable quiet settled over the ranch, the kind of silence that preceded either revelation or disaster. Lara picked up her tools and headed toward the equipment shed. 24 hours, she said to no one in particular. Better make them count. Thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm building on the horizon. 24 hours stretched before them like a trail leading into darkness. Lara worked with purpose that burned steady as a forge fire. Her hands moved through Professor Brown's techniques with the reverence of prayer. She gathered the townspeople in the south pasture, where barren ground had resisted cultivation for decades. Men and women who'd struggled against unforgiving soil stood watching as she knelt and pressed her ear to the earth. Water runs beneath us, she announced. 15 feet down, moving northeast toward Patterson's place. She traced lines in the dirt with her finger, channels and angles that defied conventional wisdom. Dig here, 3 feet deep. Channel the surface flow to meet the underground stream. That water runs uphill, Patterson protested. Can't be done. Water finds its level. We just help it find the right one. They dug where she indicated, skeptical hands moving earth with reluctant hope. The channel took shape under her guidance, precise, purposeful, following laws of physics that seemed to bend at her command. When the connection was made, water bubbled up from depths and flowed along the channel toward Patterson's drought-stricken fields, clear and sweet and impossible. Mrs. Patterson wept when the water reached her dying vegetable garden, the first tears of joy the valley had seen in months. "How?" she whispered. "Professor Brown studied water like others study scripture," Lara replied. "Every drop has its destination. Our job is to help it get there." Word spread faster than wildfire. More families arrived throughout the day. Farmers who'd watched their land turn to dust. Ranchers whose wells had run dry. People who'd accepted failure because failure was all they'd known. Lara worked with each family individually, reading their land with hands that understood soil composition and water tables and the secret language of growing things. She showed them rotation patterns that would restore fertility, irrigation methods that worked with nature instead of against it. Agent Smith watched from his position on the ridge. His patience was wearing thin as summer grass. Dutch maintained surveillance on the government men, but his expression grew more troubled as the hours passed. He pulled Marston aside during a brief break. "Something ain't right," he said quietly. "Smith's too calm. Man facing career ruin should be showing more stress. Maybe he's accepted defeat. Men like that don't accept nothing. They double down." As if summoned by their conversation, riders appeared on the eastern horizon. A dozen men in civilian clothes but military posture. They joined Smith's forces without fanfare. "Mercenaries," Arthur observed, lowering his spyglass. "Paid guns trying to look like federal agents." The truth hit Marston like a physical blow. They never intended to take her alive. Dutch's face went granite hard. "Smith's been stalling, waiting for his real team to arrive." In the pasture below, Lara continued her work with the townspeople, teaching, sharing, passing on knowledge that could transform their lives, unaware that her remaining hours were shrinking faster than expected. Micah Bell arrived with the sunset, leading another group of armed men. Local volunteers, he called them. Citizens concerned about federal overreach. His smile carried the satisfaction of a man watching carefully laid plans come to fruition. "Evening, John," he called cheerfully. "Thought you might need some additional perspective on this situation." "What kind of perspective?" "The profitable kind." Micah gestured toward his men. "Smith made me a generous offer. Compensation for helping resolve this matter peacefully." Arthur's hand dropped to his weapon. "How much they paying you, Micah?" "Enough to buy the mineral rights to this entire valley." His eyes gleamed with avarice. Turns out Miss Lara's water-finding techniques revealed more than irrigation possibilities. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The government interest hadn't been about agricultural techniques. It had been about the mineral deposits Lara's methods had revealed: gold, silver, copper, wealth beyond imagining hidden beneath struggling farms and failing ranches. "You sold out the whole community," Marston said. "I gave them opportunity, chance to profit from their land instead of watching it blow away. By taking it from them, by helping them realize its true value, Smith's organization will develop the mineral rights properly, provide jobs, bring prosperity to the region." The lie tasted bitter even as Micah spoke it. They all knew what mining companies brought: environmental destruction, exploited workers, boom towns that became ghost towns when the easy ore played out. Dutch stepped forward. "You're under arrest for conspiracy and fraud," Micah laughed. "With whose authority? Last I checked, you're a federal marshal investigating a case that's about to be resolved by federal agents with higher clearance than yours." Smith appeared on cue, walking his horse down from the ridge. His composed facade had cracked, revealing the predator beneath. "Marshal van der Linde," Smith nodded respectfully. "Your investigation has been most helpful. We'll take it from here. Show me the transfer orders." Some situations transcend paperwork. Smith's smile was cold as December wind. "Miss Croft has information vital to national security. Information that requires immediate containment." Dutch drew his weapon in a smooth motion that spoke of years enforcing federal law. "She's under my protection until proper jurisdiction is established." "Stand down, Marshal. This is bigger than your authority can handle." "My authority comes from the Constitution." "What's yours come from?" Smith's mask finally slipped completely. "From men with longer reach than territorial law can protect you from." The admission hung in the air like gun smoke. Government corruption laid bare in the fading daylight. In the pasture, Lara had gathered the children around her for a final lesson. Sadie sat closest, clutching her reading primer. The girl's eyes held understanding beyond her years. "Remember what I taught you," Lara told them quietly. "Knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. They can take away teachers, but they can't take away what you've learned." She stood and brushed dust from her clothes. Her time was ending. The demonstration had accomplished what she'd hoped. Seeds of knowledge planted in minds that would carry them forward. Agent Smith dismounted and approached the group. His men fanned out behind him, hands resting on weapons. "Miss Croft, time to honor our agreement." Lara looked around at the faces surrounding her. The Marston family, the townspeople, children who'd learned to read using methods that opened minds instead of closing them. "I'm ready. All research materials, Professor Brown's notes, everything in your possession." She reached into her satchel and withdrew a leather-bound journal, pages filled with Brown's handwriting, diagrams, formulas, the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime spent helping others. Smith accepted the journal with greedy hands. This everything, everything written down. He opened the cover and began reading. His expression shifted from satisfaction to confusion to rage. "These pages are blank." Lara's smile was soft as morning light. "Professor Brown never trusted paper with his most important discoveries. Said knowledge belonged in minds, not in books that could be burned. You memorized everything, every technique, every formula, every innovation he developed." Smith's composure shattered completely. "Then you're coming with us. Willing or not." Dutch raised his weapon higher. "Not while I'm breathing." Arthur flanked him, rifle ready. "Make that two of us." Micah's men spread out, creating crossfire positions. Government mercenaries mirrored their movements. The valley floor became a chess board where wrong moves meant death. But the townspeople didn't scatter. Instead, they moved closer to Lara, protective, determined. Men and women who'd found hope after years of struggle weren't willing to surrender it easily. "You're outnumbered," Smith observed. "Maybe," Dutch replied. "But we're fighting for something worth dying for." "What are you fighting for?" "Money." The question hit its target. Several of Smith's men shifted uncomfortably. Mercenary loyalty was shallow when mortality became real. Thunder rumbled overhead. The storm that had been building all day finally reached its crescendo. Lightning illuminated the valley in stark detail. Lara stepped forward, placing herself between the opposing forces. "Enough blood has been spilled over Professor Brown's work," she said. "I'll come quietly. No one else needs to get hurt." "No," Sadie's voice cut through the tension. The child broke free from her mother's restraining hand and ran to Lara's side. "You can't leave. We need you." Other children followed, then their parents, then families who'd seen their land transform under Lara's guidance. They formed a human wall between her and Smith's men, not with weapons or violence, but with bodies willing to stand between wrong and right. Smith faced a choice: order his men to fire on civilians, including children, or find another way to claim his prize. His hand moved toward his weapon, the moment balanced on a knife's edge. That's when Dutch revealed his final card. "Should mention something," he called out conversationally. "Been in telegraph contact with my superiors all day." Seems there's a federal task force en route from Denver, due to arrive within the hour. He pulled out his pocket watch and checked the time with exaggerated care. Real federal agents, with real warrants. Might be awkward for you to explain why you're impersonating government officials. Smith's face went ashen. You're bluffing. Am I? Care to wait and find out. The sound of approaching horses drifted across the valley. Riders coming fast from multiple directions. Too many to be coincidence. Smith's men began looking toward their escape routes. Mercenary courage had limits, and federal prison wasn't part of their compensation package. This isn't over, Smith snarled. He signaled retreat to his forces. They mounted quickly and spurred their horses toward the valley's eastern exit. Micah hesitated, torn between greed and self-preservation. John, you're making a mistake. This opportunity won't come again. Good, Marston replied. As the corrupt agents disappeared into gathering darkness, legitimate federal marshals arrived from Denver. Dutch's telegraph communications had been genuine. Justice was coming to the valley at last, but the real victory belonged to the townspeople who'd chosen hope over fear, knowledge over ignorance, community over individual profit. The storm finally broke overhead, washing the dust from the air and soaking the thirsty ground. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight knowledge had triumphed over corruption. The seeds were planted. Now came the growing. Dawn broke over transformed land. The storm had washed dust from the air and filled channels with precious water. Where barren ground had cracked under summer heat, new irrigation flowed in patterns that defied old wisdom. Lara stood in the doorway of the equipment shed, watching sunrise paint the valley gold. Her tools hung on pegs where they belonged. Her hands bore the honest calluses of work that mattered. No longer the desperate woman who'd begged for shelter. No longer the fugitive hiding from corrupt agents. She'd found her place in this community of broken people choosing to heal together. Marston approached with 2 cups of coffee. Steam rose between them in the cool morning air. "Sleep at all?" he asked. "Some." They stood in comfortable silence watching the ranch come alive. Arthur led horses to pasture. Abigail hung washing on the line. Sadie sat on the porch steps, reading aloud to herself. The girl's voice carried across the yard, clear and confident. The methods Lara had taught her were taking root. "Federal marshals finished their investigation," Marston said eventually. "And Smith's organization had connections reaching into Washington, agricultural companies, mining interests, politicians who saw profit in controlling Brown's discoveries." Lara sipped her coffee. The liquid warmed her hands and settled her stomach. "How many will face justice?" "Enough to send a message. Dutch says the Attorney General is taking personal interest." A rider approached from town. Mrs. Patterson on her old mare, her face bright with news that couldn't wait for a proper visit. "Miss Lara," she called before dismounting, "you need to see what happened overnight." They walked to Patterson's property, where dying vegetable plants had struggled in dust and heat, where Lara's irrigation channels had brought impossible water to barren soil. Green shoots pushed through earth that had been cracked and lifeless, tomato plants standing straighter, bean vines reaching toward morning light, growth that shouldn't have been possible so quickly. "Professor Brown's techniques work faster than he predicted," Lara observed. "Soil restoration happens in days rather than weeks." Other families arrived throughout the morning, each carrying reports of similar miracles on their land. Water flowing where it had never flowed. Crops responding to methods they barely understood but were eager to learn. The schoolhouse became Lara's classroom. Children and adults gathering to learn reading, writing, and agricultural science. Knowledge shared freely without regard for profit or control. She taught them to read the land's hidden language, to find water beneath impossible ground, to restore soil that mining companies had left poisoned and bare. But more importantly, she taught them to teach others. Knowledge multiplied when shared rather than hoarded. Dutch prepared to leave for Denver, his investigation complete. He'd shed his rancher's clothes for federal marshal's uniform. The transformation reminded them all that some people wore many masks in service of justice. "Keep an eye on things," he told Arthur. "Smith's organization is broken, but greedy men are like weeds. Cut one down and two more sprout." "We'll be ready," Arthur replied. Micah Bell's ranch stood empty. He'd fled during the night rather than face federal charges. His land would be sold to cover legal debts. Maybe some deserving family would find hope in soil that had known only greed. The territorial government sent official recognition of Lara's contributions to agricultural development, a certificate signed by important men who wanted their names associated with success. She hung it in the schoolhouse where children could see that knowledge mattered more than titles. As autumn arrived, the valley transformed. Green fields where dust had blown, full wells where pumps had run dry. Prosperity built on understanding rather than exploitation. Traveling merchants marveled at the change. Reporters arrived from Eastern newspapers, seeking stories of frontier innovation. Government officials made pilgrimages to study techniques they'd once tried to steal, but Lara preferred the quiet moments, teaching Sadie advanced mathematics, showing Arthur how to read soil composition, helping Abigail plan a garden that would feed the family year-round. One evening, as she worked late in the schoolhouse, footsteps approached. A figure in the doorway, silhouetted against lamplight. A young woman, travel-worn and desperate. Her clothes spoke of long miles and little food. Her eyes held the haunted look of someone running from more than poverty. "Please," the woman said, her voice breaking. "I heard there was work here. I can do anything. I'll work for just food and shelter." Lara set down her chalk and turned to face the newcomer. Recognition passed between them, not of faces but of circumstances, of desperation that drove people to distant places seeking hope. "What's your name?" Lara asked gently. Ada Wung." "Well, Ada Wung, let's see what you can do." Marston appeared in the doorway, drawn by voices. He took in the scene with understanding eyes. Another lost soul seeking refuge. Another chance to choose compassion over caution. "We always got room for someone willing to work," he said. Ada's shoulders sagged with relief. The same relief Lara had felt months ago when mercy overcame suspicion. "Thank you," Ada whispered. "Don't thank us yet," Marston replied with familiar words. "This ranch eats weak people for breakfast." "I'm not weak," Ada said quietly. The echo of Lara's own declaration months ago. The cycle continuing. Hope passed from one desperate soul to another. As they walked toward the house, Lara noticed Ada's hands, scarred in geometric patterns. Familiar marks that spoke of specialized work and dangerous knowledge. More refugees would come. People carrying secrets and skills that powerful men would kill to possess. The valley would become sanctuary for those who chose sharing over hoarding, teaching over controlling. Professor Brown's dream was taking root in ways he'd never imagined. Not just in irrigation channels and crop yields, but in human hearts that refused to let knowledge die with its discoverers. The ranch prospered. The community grew. Children learned to read both books and landscapes. Adults discovered that cooperation built more than competition ever could. Winter came gently to the valley. Snow fell on green fields and flowing water. The season of rest that preceded spring's renewal. Lara stood at her bedroom window, watching moonlight silver the transformed land. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed. More travelers coming west. Some carrying hope, others bringing trouble. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New people seeking sanctuary. New opportunities to choose between fear and compassion. But tonight, the valley rested in peace. Knowledge had triumphed over ignorance. Community had defeated exploitation. The work continued, but foundation had been laid. In the morning, there would be crops to tend and children to teach and water to channel where it needed to go. The endless cycle of growth and sharing and building something better than what came before. The giant woman who'd begged for work in a dust storm now stood as teacher and protector, and symbol of what became possible when people chose hope over fear. The transformation was complete. Not just of land, but of hearts. not just of techniques but of dreams. The valley had found its new song, and everyone who heard it was invited to sing along. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.